ain't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Eevee and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's your boy Ernie, the Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. All right, so today's video, I'm gonna be talking about Uncanny X-Men number 12. And this is the issue that I've actually been really excited for because a friend of the channel, Gavin Guidry, is the artist on this one. And not to mention the one Cajun, like actually legitimately Cajun person that I know. I actually thought it was really cool that he gets to do a book for Marvel, and it's an X-Men book, but also an X-Men title that actually focuses on what is effectively the one and only Cajun character in all of comics that anyone actually knows about. So I was really excited. I was excited for him in this, and this issue's great. I think, honestly, I'm glad the crossover stuff is done. I'm glad we're getting back to form here. I'm glad that we're getting back to the business as usual. I like that this story takes a moment to sit down and focus on Gambit. Yeah, we're still kind of paying off some of the plot threads from the previous issue where Rogue is still feeling some type of way because she realized she went a little too hard in the paint on characters like Jitter and Ransom, Calico, Death Dream, the Outliers, specifically on Jitter. But yeah, I love how that whole situation is handled. We're not dragging this out for several issues on end, or whatever. It's like, no, this is a thing that happened, and Rogue is gonna stand up and put herself on blast for how she acted, and more specifically, how she directed Gambit to attack Jitter, to show her real hard life is like when it comes to fighting against your enemies. And I like how all of this was handled. It was handled really well, done particularly well in my opinion. This issue, once again, it largely focuses on Gambit, more specifically his time as a child. And it's not to say we've never seen Gambit's past before, we have, but I feel like this was a particularly good one because it actually showcases a time when Gambit was kind of still getting used to his abilities, but also showing him at a point of vulnerability. His adopted father, Jean-Luc Lebeau, is away, and there's this rule in place where he's not allowed to mess with the Assassin's Guild. For those who don't remember, the Thieves Guild and the Assassin Guild rival factions in Louisiana, and Remy, as you might imagine, is a part of the Thieves Guild. And right now, people from the Assassin's Guild are messing with him. There's even some references to Remy's ex-wife, Belladonna, that are brought up in this. And then when you get down to it, there's the introduction of a new character by the name of the Vig. The Vig is kind of on the nose a little bit in terms of the type of character he is for the setting that he is standing in. The Vig is an enforcer style character who works for Remy's father, Jean-Luc, but is also a mutant himself, or at least presumably is a mutant, and is very reminiscent of characters like Killer Croc. But if Killer Croc were infinitely more intelligent and not played for much of a joke. The Vig is serious as a heart attack by all stretches of the imagination, and is, for all intents and purposes, the character we saw teased just a couple of issues prior at the end of Uncanny X-Men number 11. And this is a guy who has a lot of sway over Remy. And in this issue, we find out a lot of the reason why that is the case, largely because Remy is indebted to him. And he basically took care of some people that were messing with him, and thus has kind of set this whole thing up, which is kind of the whole major arc for the Vig, is that he's a swindler, he's a thief, he is a manipulator. And we kind of get to see how he plays into that. As far as individual X-Men villains go, I feel like the Vig was wrapped up a little too nice and neat in just one single issue for my taste. I feel like this is a character I would have liked to see kind of play out a little bit more. I mean, to be fair, he's not a character who could hold a candle to the rest of the Uncanny X-Men, so it's probably for the best he doesn't hang around very long. This issue is also how we discover why and how Remy is familiar with Mr. Marcus St. Jr.'s and how he ended up stumbling into Haven, which is where Gale's Uncanny X-Men have been hanging their hats as of late. And I also think Gavin did a fantastic job designing him. He looks awesome. He looks like a smooth talking alligator motherfucker.
Shut your mouth.
That's what he looks like. I don't know any other way to describe him. And I also appreciated, just how both the characters kind of got to show off their charisma in this issue as well. Like I said, this is a Gambit issue through and through. 110 million%. But yeah, it's really cool. It's really good stuff. I liked it. I think this was actually a really good story for Gambit, and definitely something that I hope, once again, if Gambit should get another solo series, I would like to see the character of the Vig make their return. The other thing that really comes up in this issue that I thought was pretty interesting is towards the end, we see the return of the character Mackenzie Denier. I don't think we knew her full name before, but now we do. And this is a character who has been hanging out with Nightcrawler as of late. We know that Mackenzie is a little sweet on Nightcrawler, especially after he helped save her daughter from almost getting run over by a Mack truck just several issues prior, literally during the or right before the X-Men raid on Greymalkin crossover. And I thought that it was a pretty neat little, interaction they were having, especially over these last few issues, where she's been coming around, visiting Nightcrawler, and just seeming genuinely sweet on him. But we see here where this character was already kind of hinted as being a bit of a problem for the local body politic, and I wondered if maybe she was a politician herself. I don't think that's the case, but she definitely seems like the type of constituent who can cause problems for local politicians. At least that's the way it was kind of intimated when we were first introduced to her as a character. And here we see her trying to meet with the mayor. We don't know what it is that she's trying to pull off. We don't know what it is she exactly wants. We know what arena she's in as far as what she wants, and it has to do with mutants. But I feel like here it's kind of played up to be a little, not so much sinister in the art department, but just in terms of where it falls in the cliffhanger aspect of it. I don't think that this is meant to be sinister. At least I hope it's not. You never know with some characters. Some characters can have ulterior motives. She seems like a good person. She seems like someone who genuinely cares about Nightcrawler as a person, which would be very heartbreaking if she doesn't. She basically says at the very end of this that she wants to talk to the mayor about mutants. And more specifically, she says, you have to do something about the mutants. Now, normally in these types of situations, it's usually someone who is very anti-mutant who is saying these things. But in this case, I'm actually kind of hoping that's not the case. I'm actually hoping this is coming from a place of kindness. You never really know. This could all be misdirect. The other thing that comes up here is we know there's a character that's going to be introduced in the next issue. I actually talked about this a little bit online, and some people agreed, some people disagreed. I don't really care. I always have my reservations when characters are talked about who are black characters who are introduced as being like, oh, they're going to be so important to the history of this, that, and the third, and whatever. I always get worried because characters like that usually almost always end up getting fridged, or they end up becoming characters who you'll never see again ever. They'll either be killed off or will be lost to the dustbin of history or put in witness protection for the rest of their days. And I always like to remind people that this is pretty common when it comes to black characters. This isn't paranoia on my part. Characters like Leonard Gary, someone who, he didn't get a lot of fanfare when he was introduced, but he was a character that was revealed to be incredibly powerful, and they one and done that motherfucker real quick. It was a guy who could literally warp reality to make inanimate objects come to life in very effective fashion. But they're like, no, this dude's got too much sauce. We can't let him hang around. And they literally killed him off. His first appearance was his last appearance. Literally grand opening, grand closing. Now, this could be the same thing with this character. Once again, we don't know who she is. Part of me wonders, though, if she is a St. Junior's. And I say that because we already know that Marcus has been hanging out in Louisiana for a while. This seems to be tied to the history of Louisiana as well as mutant kind, but also at the same time, I could easily see this be a character who's already connected to the St. Juniors. And considering that he already has a daughter who is a mutant who we saw just in the most recent issue, yeah, it all makes sense. It all makes the most sense in the world. We'll just have to wait and see what happens.